anybody who criticizes Israel is vulnerable to being called anti-Zionist or anti-Semitic, and that's conflation by the exact people you've just been talking about, in the kind of firmament of political discussion.
Do you think that's a good faith response or a tactic?
I'm about to ask you that question. Clearly, I think you and I agree. We have both been critical of the Israeli government. I just want to kind of clarify terms a bit here.
Well, I've really been critical of the Israeli government.
I've been plenty critical of the Israeli government. I've told you at the beginning that we were against this war.
What do you think of Gaza?
What do I think of Gaza?
Yeah.
I think the war in Gaza, to start with, was a perfectly reasonable response in response to the horrors of October 7th. I think now the places, I mean, I've been there. Have you been to Gaza? I've been to Gaza since the war started.
They would not
it's
let
catastrophic.
me into Gaza. Trust me, very few journalists get into Gaza.
Yeah, no, I went with the IDF. It's the only way that you can go in, but nonetheless you go in and you see a flattened place. I think it is a disaster for the future of Israel, a disaster for the Palestinian people, a horror, 70,000 people dead.
Why would you describe it first as a disaster for the future of Israel? You've got tens of thousands of civilians murdered, but it's foremost a disaster for the future of Israel? No, it's foremost a disaster for the families of the dead kids.
Absolutely. I made 3 points.
Because everybody sucks up to Israel in this way that suggests they're afraid. And everyone is afraid, and you know that. Everyone's like, the real problem is calling people anti-Semites allows real anti-Semites to flourish. It's like, no, actually, the real problem with calling people anti-Semites who aren't is accusing the innocent of a crime they didn't commit. And the real crime in Gaza is killing people who did nothing wrong. So those are the real problems, I would say. But no one can say it because you have to be like, oh no, but really October 7th
I don't know what you're talking about, Gaza. We're having a...
Everyone watching this knows what I'm talking about.
Well, let's get on to that right now.
Yeah.
Because you are critical of the government of Israel. Do you believe in Israel's right to exist? Would you consider yourself a Zionist in that narrow definition?
What does that mean, a right to exist?
The existence of the political state of Israel as
but
it
has
existed,
a right. What does that mean?
That you think it should continue in its existence as a state right now. So you do not agree with Iran, for example.
Well, let me just ask, since you asked me the question, it's fair for me to get you to define the term so I can answer it. You've asked 2 questions. The first was, do you believe Israel has a right to exist? And the second question was, do you believe Israel should continue to go on as a nation state? And those are very different questions. So I often hear the phrase... Having
been created as a political entity in 1948,
does it have a right to exist? Is that what you're asking?
I don't want to get hung up on the right.
No.
Should it continue to exist? That's how I define narrowly Zionism.
Because the phrase you used was devised by the Israeli government. Of course, does it have a right to exist? And so my question to you would be, what does that mean?
Why don't you answer my question? It's a very simple question.
I don't know what your question is.
So you're in no sense a Zionist, if that's how
I'm in no
sense
a Zionist. I don't even know what that means. Why don't you define the term, and then I'll tell you whether I am.
I've just defined it.
What's a Zionist?
That a Zionist, in my narrow term, this definition is that the state of Israel, the political state of Israel, has the right to continue existing.
The right? Where does that right come from? What do you mean? These are like, I'm not being a lawyer about it. I just want to know what you're asking me.
You answer the question.
Because I don't know what you're asking me.
Let's go to the
Wait,
third.
no. I think a lot. You don't want to define your question, and I don't know why. I don't know what you're asking me. I've already said I don't want anyone to be killed, and you've said, does Israel have a right to exist? Does it have my question is, what right are you talking about? Does Britain have a right to exist? Does the United States have a right to exist?
There was a world order built up after 1945 which suggested that aggression should not be condoned into countries, that countries with borders have the right to continue.
I totally agree with that.
Okay.
Which is why the first thing that Israel did within 2 weeks of this war starting, which is supposedly existential for them, was take southern Lebanon, take someone else's country, as they have done repeatedly. And no one even mentions that. And so I guess I would be opposed to that because I think Lebanon has a right to exist. I thought Gaza had a right to exist. But I noticed that as soon as we start apportioning rights, only one country gets them.
No, I did not say that. You're absolutely putting words into my mouth.
So because I believe, here's what I do believe, since you asked. I believe in universally applicable standards. And if they're not universally applicable, they're not standards, they're preferences. That's why I believe in human rights, not ethnic rights. I don't think Jews have more rights or less rights than anyone else. I don't think Christians have more rights or less rights, blacks, Filipinos. I believe in human rights that derive from the creation of people by God.